Hello! Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again to this splendid event. It really is always such a pleasure to come here and to see you all. Things just seem to grow every year. More people, more awardees, more enthusiasm from everybody. It's such a joy to come here. And this, of course, now is our 12th year of these special awards here at the Royal Burger Zoo. Well, yesterday, along with the winners, we had the great fortune to go quickly into the mangrove exhibit to go and catch up with the manatees. And I'm sure many of you know that a tiny little baby has just been born, a sign of their contentment in their beautiful new pool. But such an adorable little creature, clearly adored by its mother, and had us all smiling with happiness simply looking at it. But what interested me as we sat there looking at this baby was that there was this little red-eared splicer turtle that was swimming constantly around this baby's head, besotted with it, looking as if it was trying to get it to play. And it made me think how the young always bring such fun into life, and how they always make everything so interesting. Well, we've seen a lot of what the young can do over these last few months, thanks to the Fridays for Future climate change strikes that have now spread to 72 different countries around the world, protesting against the lack of political action on climate change, led by that wonderful teenage activist from Sweden, Greta Thunberg. And in Britain, where I've just come from, I've been there for the last month, these school protests have spilled over into something else, catalyzing a civil disobedience movement called Extinction Rebellion that is using peaceful protests to make a grand statement about using non-violent resistance to protest against climate breakdown and biodiversity loss, potential ecological collapse, and what all that means in terms of the long-term survival of human beings. Well, not only are both of these environmental strikes receiving the backing of serious climate scientists, but they're really getting the politicians to wake up. And they've got a huge amount of support from the general populace. And in fact, in the last few days, all these efforts have culminated in a first ever event, the UK Parliament passing a motion to declare an environment and climate emergency, the first of its kind. This is really quite something. Well, it's exactly this catalytic power of the young that I love so much about being the focus of the Future for Nature Awards. Because I think it's this really bold investment in the future. And it's what really sets the Future Nature Award apart from all the other environmental prizes that are out there. Each year, we get to celebrate the practical idealism of 3 superb young champions who are bringing new ideas and practical solutions to deal with these very complicated issues that we're dealing with in the environment. And with all these fresh perspectives and energy, they're really helping us to see things in a new way. So, we have Olivier Nsengimana all the way from Rwanda, we have Divya Karnad from India, and we have Fernanda Abra from Brazil. Please give them a round of applause. And we're also very lucky today to have 2 of our previous awardees, Wietse van der Werf and Alberto Campos, who've also joined us here. Please welcome them. And then finally, we have a man who is a rock star in the world of conservation as our guest of honor, Dr. Russell Mittermeier. Thank you. Well, of course, nothing that happens in this amazing event takes place without an enormous amount of effort and dedication from the Future for Nature team. And it's really thanks to Future for Nature, its sponsors and partners, that this Alliance of the Good has now grown to 36 members and is expanding beyond that through the Future for Nature Academy. So I'd like to thank, in particular, the Van Hoof family for their amazing work and Royal Burger Zoo. The Svanborn family of Africa's Eden. The Vaart family of the Vaart Foundation. And Michiel van Beek of Alpha Rainbow. And I hope I got the pronunciation right on all these very complicated Dutch names. And then, of course, there's the Future for Nature board, the selection committees, the board of recommendation, and all of the wonderful volunteers who've worked so hard to make this happen. Well, now I have the great pleasure of introducing our guest of honor. And whether he's wading through piranha-infested waters, catching Goliath frogs, or producing agreements between international corporations, Dr. Russ Mittermeier is a man who really makes conservation happen on the ground. He's an expert on primates, on reptiles, and on tropical forest biodiversity. And he's used his far-reaching experience to bring protection to many of these wild creatures in critical wilderness areas, with a particular focus on Brazil, the Guyanas, and Madagascar. He's been lauded as a hero for the planet by Time magazine. And he's a prolific communicator, speaking 6 languages and having written over 40 books and more than 750 scientific and popular articles. And you can imagine, with a man of this status, the awards keep on rolling in, including the Order of the Golden Ark, which he received in 1996, and this last year, the Indianapolis Conservation Prize and Lilly Medal, which is often referred to as the Nobel Prize of Conservation. And in his quest to save biodiversity hotspots, he has discovered 21 new species that are new to science. And perhaps the most apt accolade of all is that he's had 8 species named after him. He's also a long-term member of the IUCN, the chair of the IUCN Primate Specialist Group, and now the Chief Conservation Officer of the Global Wildlife Conservation. And as you can imagine, his list of accomplishments are long and absolutely breathtaking. But he said to me, please be as quick as you can in the introduction, because I've got a lot I have to tell everybody today. So to end on all of this, all I can say about Russ is that the wild world has never had a better friend and champion than him. And we cannot thank him enough for all that he's done to save the planet. Russ, please come to the stage.
Goedemiddag. Ik ben heel vereerd vandaag met jullie hier te zijn. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to give the rest of my presentation in English. In any case, I'd like to start off by thanking the Alex van Hoof family, the organizers of this wonderful event, the board of Future for Nature, for inviting me to come. What a great audience, huh? Full house. Amazing. And I'd also like to recognize some very old, very good friends here, including Peter Borkent, Willem Verweerde, I got to make sure I've got them all here, Betty Bleinberg, Niels Halbertsma. I haven't talked to you yet, Niels, but great to see you. And fellow primatologists Jan van Hoof and Herman Rijksen. So great to be here with all of you. So what I'm going to do in this presentation is talk a little bit about priorities and opportunities in biodiversity conservation. If you could dim the lights a little bit so everyone can see the slides. Look at the slides, don't look at me. And I'm going to give special reference to primates because this is my specialty. What I'm going to do is give a few personal reflections, say a little bit about what biodiversity is. I think you all know, but maybe some different perspectives on it. Run very quickly through the threats to biodiversity. Talk about setting priorities, which is something I've spent a lot of time on. And I'm going to use some examples from the extremes. Madagascar, heavily devastated. Suriname, very much still intact. And a little bit about successes that can be replicated, and then end on talking about future generations and how important it is to encourage the young people that are being recognized here today and the other young people in the audience. You guys are carrying it into the future. So people often ask me, who was your inspiration when you were growing up? And they say, was it Jane Goodall? It must have been Jane Goodall because she did all this wonderful work. Well, I love Jane. I see her all the time. I've known her for a very long time. Here's a shot of the two of us a little bit younger. That's about 35 years ago. But she was not my main inspiration. I had two sources of inspiration. One was my mother, who was a German housewife. I grew up in New York, in the Bronx and Brooklyn. Not a lot of biodiversity there. But my mother took me to the Bronx Zoo and the American Museum of Natural History just about every week. And that was major influence in my life. And I've always, as a result, been a strong advocate for zoos. Some people in our business don't like zoos. I love good zoos, like this one. And I think we should do everything possible to encourage more zoos and better zoos in the future. But the biggest inspiration for me was this guy, Tarzan. Very early on, I discovered the legend of Tarzan, the Tarzan books, the Tarzan movies, and this is what I imagined myself as a young man. I tried my best, starting at about age 6, to, beat my chest and act like Tarzan. And they asked me in first grade what I wanted to be, and I said jungle explorer. So I followed that path pretty steadily all along. I was also very much inspired by the great naturalists of the 19th century who explored the Amazon and other parts of the world, particularly Henry Walter Bates and Alfred Russel Wallace, who of course came up with the theory of evolution simultaneously with Darwin. And in 1973, I did an expedition tracing the steps of these two great explorer naturalists and also looking for these very strange monkeys, which no non-local person had ever seen in the wild before. The wakaris, this is a red wakari. The white wakaris, really strange creatures. They're still strange creatures to this day and still hard to find. And the black wakaris, and I was very fortunate to see all of them in the wild. I then switched my emphasis to Suriname. I found Suriname to be a wonderful place to work, and I did my doctoral dissertation research in this area of the Raleigh-Fall and Volksberg Reserve in central Suriname, working on the wonderful monkey species that occur there. I then moved on to the Atlantic forest of Brazil, another very high priority area, and I'm delighted that we have someone from the Atlantic forest here, one of the winners, Fernanda, who's done her work in this region, where you find the lion tamarins and the muriqui, which is the largest of the South American monkeys. In 1984, I finally started working in Madagascar, which is the #1 primate conservation priority in the world and really the #1 biodiversity hotspot. I'll say a little bit more about that shortly. And as chair of the primate specialist group of IUCN, I've had the very good fortune of looking at primates all around the world, from animals like the bonobo in the central Congo to these weird-looking snub-nosed monkeys from Yunnan province in China, to the wonderful orangutans, and of course, in Herman Reichsen here. Where are you, Herman? There you are. You have one of the greatest pioneers of research on primates in Indonesia, orangutans in particular. And in India, looking at animals like the lorises and the wonderful lion-tailed macaque. And again, it's great that we have someone from India as one of the winners of this prize as well. So what is biodiversity? You all know what biodiversity is. I use several different definitions: that wealth of genes, species, ecosystems, and ecological processes that makes our living planet what it is. It's the sum total of life on Earth. It's our living legacy to future generations. And what doesn't get said often enough is that it's the basic underpinning of sustainable development as well, and long-term human well-being. If we lose it, we're in big trouble. In essence, biodiversity is us. This is from a WAZA, World Association of Zoos and Aquarium campaign, and I think it's very appropriate. Now, a few things that people don't realize about biodiversity is how little we actually still know. We have about 1.9 million species described by science, but estimates of total diversity run from 5 to 10 million to 30 million or more, which is pretty incredible. We have this incredibly sophisticated technology. We can send spaceships to the farthest reaches of the solar system, but we don't know to within order of magnitude how many other species share the planet with us. Now, it's not that surprising when you think about rainforest beetles in the Amazon or deep-sea ocean trenches organisms. But this ignorance extends even to our closest living relatives, the non-human primates. New species are being discovered on an ongoing basis, and we're really living in an exciting new era of species discovery. Some personal examples of this. This is a monkey species from the central Brazilian Amazon that I described in 1992, the Maués marmoset, named after the Maués Indians who discovered guarana. Do you know what guarana is? A few people, well, the Brazilian knows what guarana is, okay. But I won't go into detail on it now, but this is a genus of marmoset that Mark von Roosmalen and I described in 1996. Not just a new species, a new genus. This is a new species of dwarf lemur from Madagascar, one of 7 new species of lemur that I described from Madagascar. And then we have, this is one I didn't describe, but we have some of the people that were involved in the description of this species here, Gabriela. And, there they are. These are the people who described this wonderful animal. This is the first new species of great ape described since 1929, and it's already in big trouble. And we have 2 of the leaders here in trying to save this species from extinction. In all, I've been involved in the description of 21 species, 18 primates, and 3 turtles. And that's only a small portion of the 87 species, new species of primates, that have been described just since the year 2000. And we still have a lot of them in the works. So that just gives you an impression of the level of ignorance that we still have in terms of the natural world. So what are the threats to biodiversity? I'll run through these very quickly. You know pretty much what they are. Habitat destruction, of course, is the biggest problem everywhere, especially large-scale commercial agriculture and animal agriculture, cattle ranching, other forms of animals that are grown for food. These 2 things are the biggest problem, full stop. Oil palm, an enormous problem in Southeast Asia, moving into Africa, moving into South America. This is what the fruit looks like. And I'm wondering, how many of you saw this program? This ran on Showtime a few years ago. Did that show at all here? No. Too bad. Showtime, I would have thought it would have extended to Europe as well. This is an 8-part series using celebrities like Arnold Schwarzenegger, Matt Damon, and my very good friend Harrison Ford to look at the problems that exist in terms of bad use of the environment and climate change. And I had the great privilege of filming for 9 days with Harrison in Kalimantan and Sumatra, looking at the enormous destruction that's taking place in that country. So this is a great challenge that we have to deal with. Logging. Logging is still a problem, even though it's a 19th century activity in tropical forests that has really no place in the modern world. Mining. And this very insidious threat of bushmeat hunting, which is an enormous threat even in intact forest areas. And it's not just subsistence hunting, it's large-scale market hunting in places like West and Central Africa, where even our closest living relatives are often sold for bushmeat, including the gorillas and chimpanzees. It's very hard to control, but it is an issue, especially in West and Central Africa, but also in other parts of the world as well. And then we have this overarching threat of climate change, which everybody's talking about. Serious threat, of course, but it also presents us in terms of forests with some unique opportunities. I'll say a little more about that shortly. Loss is irreversible. We're facing an impending extinction crisis. We're losing species, we're losing forests and other habitats, and we're seeing the erosion of critical ecosystem services that are essential to our own survival. One of the things I focus a lot of attention on is priority setting priorities based on the best available science. And we've used 2 priority setting mechanisms in particular, the hotspots and the high biodiversity wilderness areas. I think we have some copies of this Hotspots book here available. I'm not sure what books we sent, but we do have some copies of this. This is a concept that was first developed by the British ecologist Norman Myers back in 1988. He refined it in 1990. He had 18 hotspots, and when I was at Conservation International for 28 years, we revised this concept a number of times. And what it's all about is prioritizing areas of high irreplaceability as measured by endemic species, species found nowhere else, and high degree of threat. We now have 36 of these hotspots. They're mostly in the tropical regions of the world, but they also include the 5 Mediterranean-type systems, and they also include a number of other biome types as well. The original extent of the hotspots was about 16% of the land surface of the planet. That's about Russia and Australia put together. Almost 90% has already been lost. What remains is about 2.3% of the land surface of the planet. That's about the size of Australia. Not a very big area. Yet in that you have, as endemic species found nowhere else, at least 50% of all plants and more than 40% of all vertebrates, as endemics found nowhere else. The classic example of a biodiversity hotspot is the island of Madagascar, located about 400 kilometers off the east coast of Africa. It is a little bit larger than France. Enormous ecosystem diversity, from rainforests to these wonderful giant baobab forests, dry forests, to a desert region in the south. Plant diversity is off the charts, about 15,000 species, 80% of them endemic. That's almost as many plant species as in all of North America, north of Mexico, which is about 37 times larger. Again, reptile diversity, enormous, about 400 species. Again, this is more than all of North America, north of Mexico. But of course, what attracted me there, the real flagship species for Madagascar, are the lemurs. This is a group of non-human primates found nowhere else. 5 endemic families, 5 out of the 17 families of primates that exist on the planet, 15 genera, 111 taxa, and we got more coming, and they're found nowhere else in the world. They range in size from this little mouse lemur, Madame Bert's mouse lemur, which is about 30 grams, up to the Indri, which is the largest of the living lemurs, looks like a cross between a teddy bear and a giant panda, and jumps from tree to tree like an arboreal kangaroo. And you have the most bizarre of all primates, the aye, which separated from other primates about 40 million years ago. And if you think the adult looks strange, take a look at this baby. This one was born in the Duke Lemur Center, and they named it E.T. Unfortunately, Madagascar is also a world champion in destruction of the environment. Our own species arrived there only about 2,000, 2,500 years ago. Made a generally big mess of things. Bushmeat hunting is a problem in Madagascar, even for species like the Indri, which is like killing a giant panda. You certainly don't kill a giant panda in China, and you shouldn't be killing Indris in Madagascar as well, so this is something we're trying to deal with. 90% of the country looks like this. The worst erosion you see anywhere on the planet. I've been to almost 170 countries. I've never seen erosion this bad as you see in Madagascar. It's tragic. Mining, lots of problems. The rivers run red every year with eroded soil. So 90% of it has already been lost. The remaining natural habitat is only about 50 to 60,000 square kilometers, only a little bit bigger than the Netherlands. The Netherlands is 44,000 square kilometers. So imagine all this globally important biodiversity crammed into an area a little bit bigger than your country. It's pretty scary. So this is the reason we consider Madagascar to be the world's highest priority biodiversity hotspot. So what have we been doing about it? Well, in 2002, a new president, this gentleman, Mark Ravalomanana, came into power. And we went into him and said, Mr. President, you've got to increase your protected area coverage. You only have about a few percentage points of protected areas in your country, and you should double it. And he said, double it? I'll triple it. So at the World Parks Congress in South Africa in 2003, he announced his intention to triple protected area coverage, which was great. We were very excited, and he said, help us put together a $50 million trust fund, which we did over the course of the next few years. We raised $50 million to make this a reality. Now, I also brought a number of celebrities to Madagascar to really get the president excited and really to generate more action. You know who this guy is? Richard Branson loves lemurs more than I do. It's amazing. I took him there just a few years ago, and I was amazed how much he's committed to lemurs. He has a number of them in captivity on his island in the Caribbean. We also had a little bit of help from Hollywood. Not exactly a biologically accurate film, but nonetheless, it did put the name Madagascar on the map in the United States. Now at least people know there is a Madagascar out there, even if they think there are giraffes and lions and hippos living there. So at least to start. I was about to declare success. I was writing an article called Madagascar, an Incipient Success Story in 2008, the end of 2008, saying things are going really well, it's working out. Boom. 2009, the mayor of the capital city, a 34-year-old former disc jockey, decides he didn't like the president, stages a coup, and wins, and with backing from the military. And he was in power from 2009 to 2013, and during that period, not a single country recognized him. There was a huge increase in illegal trade, rosewood, very valuable rosewood, being cut down from national parks, sent illegally to China. Huge trade in these wonderful tortoises that are endemic to Madagascar. And finally, in 2013, there were elections. A new president came in with the longest name of any president in the world, Rajanari Mampianina. The Malagasy have long names. I tried about a week to learn how to pronounce this, and I finally got it. He brought the donors back, the international donors. He got the country recognized again, but he didn't do very much else. So, end of last year, there's elections again. And it was Ravalomanana, the first president who did the tripling, against the guy who staged the coup. And guess who won? This guy. So I said, oh my God, what are we going to do now? So I thought, we're stuck with him for 5 years. This is the political reality. The realities of conservation go up and down. And I said, I got to go and meet with him. So I met with him 4 days before his inauguration in January. I sent him a long letter about the need to recognize conservation as one of the great brands of his country. And he's actually, I came away from that meeting very positive. I'm going to see him again in about a week when I go back to Madagascar. And I think we can actually work with him. So you just got to be flexible in this business and recognize that there are no final victories. And if people get in that you don't like, you still have to work with them. We have good examples of that in the United States, although I haven't tried to meet. I haven't tried to meet with Trump yet. I'm planning not to, actually. But the bottom line in all of this is that whatever happens at the government level, the key element is working with local communities. You have to engage the local communities that live in proximity to the high priority areas for conservation, because ultimately they're the ones who are always going to be there. They're the ones who are going to decide whether or not you're successful. And this has worked very well in many places, including Madagascar. The other end of the spectrum from the biodiversity hotspots is the wilderness areas, the high biodiversity wilderness areas. Again, we did a book on this, and I think we have copies of this one available as well. The main wilderness areas are in the 3 big forest blocks, Amazon, Congo forests, and New Guinea. And these areas also, like the hotspots, have high biodiversity, high endemism, but they're still largely intact, more than 80, 90% intact. The most intact rainforest area on the planet is the Guiana Shield region in northeastern South America. Within the Guiana Shield region, you have Suriname, the greenest country on earth. Now, this is the only audience in the world where I don't have to explain that Suriname is not in Asia, not in Africa, because you all know where Suriname is. Everywhere else, I have to go through an elaborate explanation and give lots of maps showing Suriname and its importance. In any case, Suriname is the highest rainforest cover on the planet. 93% forest covered. Nobody else is close. The next closest country is Gabon in West Africa, which is about 84, 85%. If you don't think it's a green country, take a look at this map. Primary forest, mostly primary forest, tremendously important for biodiversity, also hugely important for climate change as well. Amazing coastal beaches with nesting sea turtles, great biodiversity in the interior of the country, like the cock of the rock, and of course the wonderful monkeys that attracted me, 8 species of monkeys that attracted me there in the first place, and unlike most places, none of them are in danger. They're all doing pretty well. And enormous cultural diversity. You have people from India, you have people from Java, you have people from China, you have the oldest Jewish community in the New World, and you have these wonderful Maroons, or Bosnege, Businenge, as they call themselves, the last runaway slave cultures that still exist as West Africans in the interior of the Amazon forest, my favorite people in the world. What we're doing in Suriname in particular is partnering with these indigenous people and local communities to create what are called indigenous and community-owned conservation areas. And what we're working on at this moment is a big, big area, 7.2 million hectares, with the Trio and Wayana people that live in about 10 villages in the southern part of Suriname. This is what their area looks like, spectacular rainforest. And there you see the orangey color at the bottom. This is an enormous area. This is almost twice the size of the Netherlands. And it's contiguous with areas that are already protected in Brazil, Guyana, French Guiana. The total is about 20 million square kilometers. It's about the size of our state of Florida, which is a very big state. There's no more than 8,000 to 10,000 people living in this. So this is real wilderness, and there's an opportunity to protect it in perpetuity. Oops. This builds on what we did in 1998, creating the 1.6 million hectare Central Suriname Nature Reserve, which has no people in it. And combined, these two are at 8.8 million hectares, which is just about double the size of your country. And again, 2,000 to 3,000 people. Imagine the Netherlands with 2,000 to 3,000 people in it. You don't find that in too many places. The bottom line is that these hotspots and high biodiversity wilderness areas are the top priority in terrestrial biodiversity conservation. And if we fail in these areas, especially in the hotspots, we're going to lose a large portion of the world's terrestrial biodiversity, regardless of how successful we are everywhere else. These areas are also tremendously important for human cultural diversity. If you're not interested in biodiversity, how about human cultures? Of the roughly 7,000 languages that are still spoken on our planet, 74% of them are found in the hotspots and high biodiversity wilderness areas, including those languages that are endangered, critically endangered, down to a few dozen, a few hundred, a few thousand people speaking them. So it's a real win-win situation, combining efforts for biodiversity conservation and working with these indigenous people. So, actions needed. There's many actions needed. I'm just going to focus on one thing in particular. I'm a big fan of ecotourism because I think it's a very effective, quick-fix solution if you do it the right way. I'm very inspired by my oldest son, who's 33 years old and is finishing his PhD at Oxford. He's a world-class birder. He's seen about 5,000 birds in the wild, and I watched how incredibly connected this network of birders are globally. And I thought, and bird watching in the US, amazingly, there's about almost 50 million people who self-identify as bird watchers. And these are old figures from about 6 or 7 years, from 8 years ago. Economic impact in the US, $40 billion. You don't realize that, but it's a very, very powerful community. And I thought, why not do the same thing for primates? Okay, there's 11,000 birds, there's only about 711 or something like that, primate species, but why not try to start primate watching, primate life listing? This is something I started about 20 years ago now. There's wonderful examples out there, the mountain gorilla being the absolute best one, and Olivier, of course, knows that very well because he's worked on mountain gorillas in his career. This is the Virunga Volcanoes area, bordering Rwanda, Uganda, and Congo. Amazing opportunities to see gorillas. It now costs you $1,500 for 1 hour. If you want to go the next day, it costs you another $1,500. And there's a long line. It's hard to get a reservation to see them. It's so successful. And what's great about it is the money goes to the communities. You can stay in a $2,000 a night hotel there, owned by the community. So there's huge enthusiasm on the part of these communities for such activities. Now, there's a rule there that says you can't get any closer than 7 meters to the gorillas, right? So you have to be very respectful, stay together, be quiet. And unfortunately, the gorillas don't know that rule. So my second son and I were sitting there watching the females and the babies once, and where's the silverback? Where's the silverback? All of a sudden, the silverback comes out behind us, brushes up against us, and walks away. And my son had the courage to take a picture. I was just sitting there shaking. The greatest place for primate watching, the easiest place, is Madagascar. You got 111 species. It's super easy. You want to come to Madagascar with me? I'll show you 20 species in 10 days. You can't do that easily anywhere else. You can't do that in the Amazon or in the Congo without mounting a major expedition. And they're absolutely delightful. They'll even dance for you. And again, this is the essence of it, working with communities. We have great guide associations there. We have strong community efforts. There's great guides in these communities. These people are making a lot of money from guiding, and some of them are so excited about it that they're creating their own community reserves right next to government-level reserves. Now, facilitating this, we've produced a number of products for primate watching, field guides like this on lemurs, primates of Colombia, a bunch of pocket guides if you don't want to carry a heavy field guide with you. We have a lemur conservation network. If you'd like to look at that, join it. We're working on an app, the first ever app for primate watching for the lemurs. And, of course, I have personal objectives in all of this as well. I've now seen only about 400 of the 700-odd species that are out there. So I'm never going to see all the primate species, but I thought, what's an achievable goal? I want to try to see all 79 genera of primates. Those of you who've had a biology background know that genus is the level above the species. There are 79 genera of primates in the world, and 10 days ago in southern Tanzania, I became the first person to see all 79 primate genera in the world. So that made me very happy because I'm getting too damn old to climb around these mountains. And this is one of the last shots I had at actually going out and seeing these animals. This is what this animal looks like. It was only described in 2005, and really unusual creature that, if you know primates, it's not quite a baboon, it's not quite a mangabey, it's in the middle. It's a very distinctive creature. Okay, wrapping up. Climate change, the biggest issue environmentally, the biggest issue, period, on the planet. I was at the Paris conference, went very well. We got a global agreement. The US signed, almost everybody signed. Our enlightened president has pulled out for the time being, but hopefully we'll have a new one in next year. What was one of the things that emerged from all of these climate discussions is the importance of forest carbon and the need to reduce emissions from deforestation and degradation, because these are contributing a very large part of the greenhouse gases that are out there. And what we found is that rainforests are at least 30% of the solution to climate change. Think about that. Protecting and restoring rainforests is at least 30% of the solution. It's by far the most cost-effective solution. And still, it's only getting about 1% to 2% of the investment in climate change. So we're working very hard to get the international community to recognize how important protection and restoration of these rainforests actually is. Very interesting data point. A paper came out a few years ago that said that 1% of the forest trees in Amazonia, 1%, about 20 species, mostly the large, emergent, slow-growing hardwood trees, are responsible for 50% of the carbon capture. That's pretty incredible. And when I looked at the list of species, I said, I know these species. I studied monkeys in the Amazon. Most of these are dispersed by large frugivorous monkeys like spider monkeys, by frugivorous birds, large birds like this curassow, by tapirs, and we know tapirs well. We're going to hear more about them shortly. And even by forest floor tortoises, which eat large seeds, carry them around. They're semi-nomadic. And they drop them out with a little bit of fertilizer, and they play a very key role in dispersal as well. But what are the first animals that get hunted out when you go into a forest? These are the ones that get hunted. What are the first trees to be cut down when there's quote-unquote sustainable logging, which isn't sustainable? It's the big hardwood trees that capture the carbon. So we're finding out now that forests are worth more standing than cut down for other land uses, maybe much more, and we really need to take a holistic approach to all of these issues, joining biodiversity, tropical forests, indigenous people and local communities, and climate change, because everything is interconnected. Unless we recognize this, we're not going to be successful. We still have a long way to go to convince the world to change old entrenched behaviors, but we're seeing increasing interest in green growth initiatives that are coming to scale. Long way to go still, but I'm optimistic that we can get somewhere. And we have one book, I think we have copies of this one available as well, that talks about this issue, and we're just finishing up another book right now called Natural Solutions to Climate Change, which we'll make available to anyone who's interested. To finish up, future generations. These are my kids, my ex-wife, who's still a very good friend, and my 3 kids. This is my son, John, who's now doing his PhD at Oxford, playing with a little turtle when he was in his diapers. He has gone into a career in conservation. This is my second son, Mickey, who was a really promising herpetologist, really interested in reptiles ever since he was a little kid. And then something happened to his brain about 3 years ago. I think we must have smacked him around too much when he was a kid, and he switched to plants. He became a botanist. And now he's one of the world's experts on several groups of plants, including Eraceae, the philodendron, if you know anything about plants, monstera. He keeps spouting out these scientific names. I don't know what the hell he's talking about. And there he is, playing with his plants. And my daughter's name is Juliana. And can you guess who she's named after? She's named after Queen Juliana because when I got the Golden Ark Award, my then wife was pregnant with Juliana, and I thought, I like the Queen so much, I like the name so much, I said, I'm going to name my daughter Juliana. So there she is. That's Juliana, who hasn't yet chosen her field in the environment, but she is working in the environment. We'll give her a few more years to make a detailed career choice. So together we have the opportunity to change the course of conservation history. We should be able to conserve the full range of global biodiversity, maintain critical habitats, and have, at least as an aspirational objective, 0 extinctions. But we have only a short window of time in which to act. So I'll end it there, just about exactly 30 minutes. And I'll end with one of my other favorite species. This is the famous blue poison dart frog from just a few little mountains in southern Suriname, found nowhere else in the world. Another wonderful creature that we need to conserve. So thank you all very much.
Well, thank you very much, Ross. He was told very firmly to stick within the 30-minute guideline, and he did it. So, but every word was an absolute gem, and thank you so much for everything that you've done. Well, before we meet this year's winners, and before we hear a short message from our winners of last year, we wanted to hear from one of our laureates from 2016, what winning the Future for Nature Award meant from him, and whether it actually made a difference to his life. Wietse van der Werf is a very interesting strategic thinker, and one of the most optimistic and positive people I've ever come across. His idea that he presented to us a few years ago was to find ways to repurpose the ordinary, the stuff that we do every day to serve the environmental cause. And I have to tell you, Wietse, that is something that I have carried with me every single day since we last met, and mentioned it many, many times. He was originally recognized back then for his work trying to protect fish in the Mediterranean Sea. And so I'd like to invite you on stage now to tell us what you've been up to ever since then. Welcome.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have a little cold, just so you know. I wasn't out very late last night, but I stood on this stage 3 years ago, winning the Future for Nature Award. And up until that time, I'd run a number of projects around the Mediterranean, looking at the illegal fishing of tuna and shark finning. And it was actually a really big surprise to win this award. In fact, I learned about the deadline to apply about 6 hours before it was due, and managed to get the application in. And it was, you know, an amazing experience to be here and to be sort of recognized for the work, but also to have the opportunity to suddenly have a cash prize. And actually, you know, at the time, the initiatives I ran, other people were very much involved, and I could sort of take a step back and think, well, what else could I do? And one of the things which really sort of, I guess, I took to heart, and what in a way bothered me, was the fact that, you know, a lot about what Russell spoke about, the protected areas. Actually, in our oceans today, there are about 12,000 marine protected areas. And these are biodiversity hotspots. These are breeding spots for fish. These are very important places to protect. The reality is that while these 12,000 areas are about 5% of the world's oceans, you know, and many organizations are working to make that 10, 15% soon. The reality is that only a few percent of these areas have enough staffing, have enough ships and people to actively protect them. So when you take that into consideration, the current amount of ocean that is actually protected is not even 0.5%, simply because building ships and training people is so expensive that it's just not viable. It's not something politicians, I guess, you know, make the top priority it needs to be. So when I won the prize, we actually started a new initiative called the Sea Ranger Service. And we do two things. One is we started thinking about, could we, in a way, utilize and build special sailing ships to actually bring, you know, rangers out to these areas? Because when you use sailing ships, of course, there's no fuel costs, so the costs are low, and it's very clean to operate. These ships are steel-hulled, so they're like very sturdy work ships, but they are sailing ships. And around about the same time as I won the award, one thing, a sort of little niche fact came to my mind, which I found out that if you look globally, almost every country that borders the sea, the highest rates of youth unemployment are in the port cities. So if you look in Europe, places like, say, Oostbrugge, Rotterdam, Den Helder, Grimsby in the UK, Barcelona, all these places, very high rates of unemployment. From father to son in these port cities, jobs have disappeared. So I thought, what if we combine these two elements? In fact, what if we use veterans from the Navy and we train unemployed young people, you know, as sea rangers? And essentially, this can be much like a park ranger. They can do this work out at sea. And if there is a way to protect nature while creating jobs, then of course, politically, it becomes a bit of a different narrative. So we ran a first boot camp, and in 5 weeks, the youth, they get a lot of, well, they're former Marines also involved in the training, so there's a lot of discipline and structure. And they learn to go sailing and diving and get all these maritime qualifications. And what we found is that I was on the radio 2 times, on the Dutch radio, just for a few minutes. Within 2 months, we had 600 applicants. And many young people who are just looking to, you know, add purpose to their life and do something good for the world. suddenly found an enormous sort of sense of identity and pride in being a sea ranger and having that status. And we've just gone out and we simply started the work. And at the same time, we thought we shouldn't go out as an NGO. We shouldn't campaign. This is about bringing capacity. This is about making agreements with governments, really ensuring that these rangers have actual power behind them to do the work. So to my sort of amazement, after 1 year of doing a lot of enthusiastic talking with the government officials, 4 ministers in the Netherlands said, yes, we're going to back this program. In fact, we have areas in the North Sea that need protecting, that need monitoring, where we need to do research, where we need to regenerate nature. And you can bring the ships, and you can create the jobs. So the prize suddenly made it possible to start all this work and to get this happening. But it didn't quite stop there. And even within a year and a half after having this Dutch agreement, only a few months later was I on a far bigger stage with about 1,000 delegates from countries around the world, where I met Prince Albert of Monaco and John Kerry and all these, Prince Charles from the US. And I get off the stage, sorry, from the UK, Prince Charles from I can't keep track of all these princes and but it's amazing to stand there and to be, I'm actually, I study to be a violin maker. That's my profession. I just have a big passion for nature, and I like, talking enthusiastically about the things that are possible. But what we found was that it makes it so simple, training these youth, supporting the veterans, and politically, it's very, very attractive. So when I got off the stage there were about 10 delegates from different countries, from Indonesia, Norway, UK, who said, we need to talk, and in fact, we want you to start the program in our country. So even the United Nations have now said they want to partner with us, so we're now in the process of becoming an official affiliate of the United Nations. And it literally all started here on this stage 3 years ago with the help of some of the people that are here today. And the last thing I would say is that ultimately, while it's strategic and you want to have these big partners and you need to get a lot of funding behind it, I think for the winners here today as well, it's about finding a link and speaking to the sort of intrinsic motivation of ordinary people, getting young people on board, getting them excited, and giving people a way to simply start, whether they're kids or teenagers, And I would say if we're able to, in all the programs we run, sort of mobilize that younger generation, I believe that is the true, really offers hope for there to be a true future for nature. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Adam Miller, and I was one of the 2018 winners of the Future for Nature Awards.
And I so warmly congratulate the 2019 Future for Nature Award winners, Fernanda, Olivier, and Divya.
I can't believe it has been a year since I was at Berkeley Zoo.
Especially, I congratulate you for your outstanding and fascinating work for nature.
And a huge thank you to all that you guys do in your day-to-day lives to conserve this planet and the beautiful biodiversity that's on it.
Receiving the Future for Nature Award is the best experience in my life. Not only that I get to know and also become one of the FFN family member, I get so much support from everyone.
The Future for Nature Award is an amazing week and has certainly helped me and my organization to reach new goals and achieve new outcomes and reach new heights in our work.
Since that time, my work has made big progress on various fronts. My research could show that the Himalayan wolf will always prefer to eat wild prey over domestics. But this is a key point for conservation, and we can remedy this. We need to preserve large, intact patches of untouched nature, as needed all over the planet.
Through FFN, I was also able to connect with Ophir, our wildlife warrior, and we decided to collaborate. Our first collaboration was a success when we were able to arrest 4 wildlife traffickers in Cameroon with 3 tons of pangolin scale and over 300 elephant tusks. So don't worry, I'm still chasing criminals.
With great joy, I recall my time at the award ceremony 1 year ago. It was a once-in-a-lifetime experience that provided me a long-lasting motivation boost.
And I hope you enjoy every single minute at the event, including the terrifying moment that you have to stand up and give a talk to everyone.
Finally, to the audience, I hope that you all feel inspired today by these three wonderful stories, these three young conservationists who are risking it all, who are giving it all to save this planet.
With this, I wish you the Future for Nature Award winners 2019, beautiful, beautiful Saba, and the exceptional crowd in the audience. I wish you an amazing ceremony.
I wish you all the very, very, very best.
We can all fight for the future for nature.
Oh, always get very emotional seeing my babies up on the screen there. Right, well, now it's time to move on to the very first of this year's winners. Hailing from the south of India, Divya Karnad was never allowed to have pets as a child. So instead, she just stepped around that and adopted any needy animal that came her way, ending up with quite a large menagerie. Several feral cats, a wild parakeet, an abandoned bonnet macaque, an injured bat, and likewise an injured black kite, into whom she poured her love and affection to help them recover and eventually rehabilitate. Well, her parents were a little concerned by this rather unreasonable passion that she had for wildlife, and did everything in their power to try and steer her back to a more conventional course. But she pressed her point by running away and hiding in a forest where she camped out for 15 days, all on her own, in protest. It was inevitable, perhaps, with this ocean upbringing that she had, that she would eventually go back to marine conservation. And this is really where she found her métier, watching the olive ridley turtles come onto the beaches to lay their eggs at night, and being enchanted by all the bioluminescent organisms that she saw dancing against the black sand. But as her interest deepened, so the world around her also changed. A huge increase in pollution, in development, and of course in this awful artificial light that is going everywhere across the coastal regions, that began wreaking havoc on all these animals that she so loved. Well, what Divya brings to the table, which I think is so different, is a deeply sensitive cultural understanding of the people that she lives and works with. She has an amazing ability to listen with real empathy, to disarm people who are aggressive, and to embrace with real practical solutions the searing problems that are faced by so many people that rely on the sea for their livelihood. She is now a passionate champion of the least loved but the most important of all apex predators, the sharks in the oceans. It is a great pleasure, Divya, to have you here. Congratulations on this amazing award. Please come to the stage.
Thank you so much. This is overwhelming in so many ways. Thank you so much to the Future for Nature organization, and especially, this is not just a recognition of me, but a recognition of my small team. And thank you so much to my teammate and husband for being here. So today I want to start out talking about how I started on my conservation journey and how I began to think about conserving sharks. And it all started because I grew up in a little, not a very little, but a coastal city in India, which is actually far from little. It has 4.6 million people. And so that coastal city on the southeast coast of India has a lot of diversity. There are people like me who can speak in English, but there are also people like this fisherwoman. And we all live together, and we all come together, especially when we have to commute from one side of the city to the other. And this was something that I did often using public transport as a student. And public transport meant taking buses, which looked like this. So we were all packed in like sardines. And it was not just the crowd that was suffocating. It was the fact that this gave an opportunity to the men on the bus to try a lot of inappropriate things with women. And many of you must have heard that India has been hitting the headlines for all the wrong reasons, especially with respect to sexual harassment. And unfortunately, it was something that I used to come across very commonly. And because it was so common, it was often very difficult to get anyone to help when this happened. So when I was stuck in a bus when something like this was happening to me, the only people I could turn to were the fisher women in the bus. They were the people who used to sit in front with the big baskets of fish, but they were also really strong and courageous. And they would get together and deal with the guy, and if necessary, even kick him off the bus. So these fisher women were something unique. They were more powerful than even I was. And what made them special is because their society worked very differently from the rest of Indian society. In fisher society, the fishermen fish, but the women trade. And so they have the money, which is what empowers them to know how to deal with the men. So these were the women who were crucial in my journey as a conservationist. They made the difference between how I chose to approach conservation later on in life. But in that moment, in that bus, all I wanted to do was run away, escape to some place that didn't have all those people, and I wouldn't be felt up like that. And my escape was the beach. I used to run there to find peace, but I also happened to find wildlife. And the wildlife that I found was sea turtles. I started my journey as a volunteer with sea turtle conservation, trying to protect their nests on the beach. But much to the horror of my family and friends, I ended up with this as a career. My family and friends hoped that I would choose something which had some kind of financial security, and instead I became a conservationist. So while I was studying sea turtles, one of the main things that I was looking at is how they are affected on land, how this kind of artificial lighting on the beach disorients and confuses them. But every time that I did this, I noticed that there were a lot of dead adult turtles washing ashore. So clearly, even though there were problems on land, there was obviously much more happening at sea that I needed to look at. And so I decided to shift my focus. I started looking at the sea and trying to identify what it was in the sea that was really affecting these turtles. And I realized that the major issue that just hit everyone in the face was fishing. In India, fishing is happening at such a large scale, 14 million people depending on fishing, that even though turtles are dying, there are much more dire things happening, and no one is really doing anything about it. Critically endangered species and endangered species are regularly hauled up as part of fish landing catches. And no one is doing anything about it because these species are not protected by Indian law. And the species that I'm talking about are species of sharks. So sharks like these are apex predators, which means they are at the top of the food chain. And if they disappear, the entire fishery collapses. We have an example of this in India. So there are islands called the Lakshadweeps that are off the west coast of India. And all the large sharks in the waters of those islands were completely wiped out by overfishing. When this happened, sea turtle populations exploded. And they ate up all the seagrass that was available in that region. The seagrass used to be the nursery for fish. That is where they used to breed. And as soon as the seagrass disappeared, the fisheries collapsed within a few years. Now, this is something that we may expect to see across the mainland coasts of India within the next few years at the rate things are going. And this is something that should concern not just Indians, but the entire world, because India has 1/3 of the global diversity of sharks. But India also hauls out 70 million kilos of sharks every year. This makes India the world's second largest harvester of sharks, after Indonesia. This species that you see here is called a sawfish. There was a time in the late 1800s when in India, these kinds of sawfish were being caught in the thousands every day. This is the first sawfish to be caught this year, and it made news because it is so rare that it was considered almost extinct. This is the picture that I got from the newspaper. Now, people think that this level of fishing for sharks is mainly happening because of the high demand there is for shark fins in China. There's a lot of talk in the global conservation conversation about how the demand for shark fin soup is what is driving this huge fishing for sharks. But what's been happening in recent times is that the demand has actually been declining. Conservation efforts in China have been working, and in addition to that, there have been international bans that prohibit trade in shark parts across countries. With the help of all this, one should be seeing a decline in shark fishing. But my research has been showing that in India, this is not happening. Sharks are still being fished at the same rates. So why? Why are sharks still being fished this way? The answer is food. In India, it is traditional to eat sharks as part of coastal people's diets. And increasingly, as the nationalistic fervor is taking over India, as it is in many other nations, chefs and restaurants are looking to these kind of indigenous ingredients to kind of accentuate their menus. So I'm seeing shark meat pop up on menus all over the country. Now, this is concerning for this reason, but it became even more concerning for me personally because I realized that at the center of it all were the fisher women. They were the ones who were trading sharks. They were the ones who were cooking sharks in their homes. They were the ones who were teaching people to eat sharks. But unfortunately, they were also the ones who protected me when I was that young student on the bus. So as a conservationist, this gave me a huge dilemma. How was I supposed to go to these people and tell them to stop selling sharks and to stop their livelihoods when it was their livelihoods that protected me in the first place? So this made me decide that I had to change my approach. I couldn't say stop the shark trade, but what I could say maybe was change the trade. And therefore, I decided to start this program called In-Season Fish. So what we do with in-season fish is that we try to influence the supply of sharks by talking to fishermen, and we also try to influence the demand by talking to chefs and restaurants. So we go out to the fish landing sites, and we educate fishermen about how sharks are different from other fish, because they are slow breeders. They don't produce millions of eggs like other fish. They have very few babies at a time. And then we also work with the chefs and the restaurants. We bring those chefs and the restaurants to the landing sites, and we show them what the alternatives are, how they can choose sustainably, and more importantly, we show the fishermen that the people exist. There is a market if they stop catching sharks. There are people who will buy their produce if they stop catching sharks. We do the same thing at fish markets. We take people to fish markets and show the fisher women that there is no risk in completely removing sharks from their selection or their table. So with this project, I've realized that it is not just me who can be a conservationist. It's a chef or a fisherman or a fisherwoman. We're all conservationists in this together. But right now, this is just a conservation project. If it has to make any difference, it has to turn into a conservation movement. We have to get more and more people involved. People like you and me and everyone. I mean, this whole experience, the Future for Nature organization, has shown that an organization in the Netherlands can help save sharks in India. For this to happen, it really requires all of us to come together. And I'm saying this not just as a person who's deeply passionate about conservation. I'm saying this also because I'm a mother, and I have a daughter. And I want her to grow up in a safe and sustainable world. So according to me, sustainability and conservation is not an option anymore. Because if we don't do it now, we don't have a future. Thank you so much for this opportunity, and thank you especially to the Future for Nature organization.
Divya, that was amazing. Thank you so much. Our second winner today, Fernanda Abra, has, as her very first memory, a collection of snails that she found in her back garden that she set aside and observed for hours and then meticulously measured. And once she was eventually done, she translocated them to a place of greater safety. And all of this took place when she was about 5 or 6 years old, which is really not a bad effort at all for a neophyte biologist. We have a little stage decoration to do here before we get on to Fernanda's piece. It will all be clear. It was very clear right from the beginning that her path was set in one direction, because she always knew that she wanted to look after animals when she grew up. And this love she had for nature was further catalyzed each carnival when her parents would take her out camping, teaching her how to cook over a fire and canoe and fish. Beyond fueling her love for adventure, it also opened her eyes to the sheer beauty and the perfection that she saw in the natural world and in the diversity of life all around her, something that she has treasured her whole life. Well, having trained as a biologist, she's chosen a difficult path in the field of road ecology, which is hugely relevant for the future for biodiversity in her home country of Brazil and indeed across the rest of the world. But it is also an extremely demanding career on her emotional capital. And Fernanda reminds me a little of a war photographer. Every day she has to go out there and document the awful toll on life that has been taken by the road. And she does this with that sheer determination of a scientist. But then, as a girl, as a woman, she mourns the loss of each of these small creatures as she holds them in her hands. Well, these large infrastructure projects are not going away. We are seeing them coming raging across Africa. They're raging across South America. And they are an enormous threat to wildlife and are set to grow exponentially over the next few decades, especially in biodiversity-rich countries. What she's doing is more than important. It is absolutely essential for our future, finding ways to maintain the connectivity between these critical ecosystems that are the basis of the ecosystem services upon which we depend for our survival. And it's something that gets ever harder as our world shudders under this ever-increasing weight of humanity. I know some of us here have been very concerned about the direction that Brazil's new president has been talking when it comes to the environment, following in the footsteps of other people we know. But it will be people essentially like Fernanda who are going to hold that green line and make sure that things get better. So it is enormously important that she's here today. We're enormously proud of you, Fernanda. Welcome to the stage.
Well, I would love to give a Dutch introduction as Russell did, but the maximum I can do is dag. Okay. Brazil is an amazing country. Our biodiversity is astonishing. We have 20% of all living species on this planet. and they are well distributed in 6 different terrestrial ecosystems. Brazilian wildlife is unique, and they are so beautiful, they are so perfect, that I can spend hours observing them in nature and never get tired of it. I have the great pleasure to work with these 3 cool species: giant anteater, maned wolf, and lowland tapir. Unfortunately, they are vulnerable of extinction in Brazil. When I was little, I started to be very curious about everything related to animals. I was obsessed by them. And I have a memory that walking on my neighborhood, I found a dead egret. I brought the egret with me to my house. I put it on the fridge because I would like to study the animal later. When my mom saw it, she had to throw out all the food because it was all contaminated. But in that day, she was not happy with me. But because she's a wonderful and supportive mother, she kept the egret for me. Because I love animals, I decided to be a wildlife biologist. But instead to work with beautiful live animals, I decided to work with what is ugly and sad. I work to reduce wildlife vehicle collisions on Brazilian highways. My first contact with road ecology was during an internship. And I remember I received roadkill data from a toll road company in the center-west of São Paulo state. When I finished to organize the data, I had a long list full of Brazilian mammals roadkilled. On the top of the list, we have capybara. It's a common and large mammal. But other species, they are rare, threatened, and endangered. In that moment, I knew in my heart I had to do something about it. I could give my contribution. For my master's degree, I conducted research with underpasses, box culvert and water culvert. The big question in Brazil was, do Brazilian mammals use underpasses? If so, how much? At the end of the first campaign to monitor these structures, I was so excited to see the results that I went to the camera trap, I removed the memory card, and when I saw the first images of the animals passing under the roads in safe, I was very happy. Now, I was no longer just working with roadkills. I started to understand how to mitigate the impact. I was working on solution for this big problem. Brazil has the 4th longest road network in the world. It's so big, so enormous, you can go to the moon 5 times. Because of economic growth, there is an increasing demand for transportation of people and goods. And roads are accessing now the most remote natural areas we have in Brazil. Atlantic forest, Amazon rainforest, Brazilian savanna, Cerrado ecosystem, and Pantanal. Pantanal is our wetlands. The road impacts wildlife in many different ways. It creates impassable barriers for movement, including migration, and traffic can cause unnatural mortality. But it's not just in pristine natural areas that roads are a problem. Roads are everywhere. Thousands of animals are roadkilled every day, everywhere, and all the time in Brazil. This is a silent and dangerous impact. In São Paulo state alone, during my PhD research, I estimated 38 wild mammals being roadkilled per year in São Paulo state. It's important to highlight that São Paulo is 1 out of 25 states in Brazil, and there are other bigger states and with higher biodiversity. Researchers agree that roadkill is the worst impact that causes unnatural mortality for wildlife populations. I call Brazil roads sinks because they act as a drain on our rich biodiversity. This picture was taken at Chapada dos Veadeiros National Park. It's a biodiversity hotspot with Brazilian savanna and iconic species such as jaguar, giant anteater, giant armadillo, hoary fox, ocelot. And that was the first time I saw these species. That's the striped hog-nosed skunk. It's a rare and unknown species in Brazil. Unfortunately, the animal was roadkilled and is still warm when I pick it up. In less than 1 second, the life of that animal was gone, as well as the role it had in nature. This specific road was upgraded some years ago, and wildlife was not considered at all in the project. But what if we can find a way to live together with animals in our landscapes? How many mammals can we save in Brazil if Brazil changed culturally the way they plan the infrastructure, they build, and they put their roads in use? How many mammals can we save if we make the decision makers aware about roadkills and show them how to mitigate this impact? During 10 years working as road ecology in Brazil, I realized that most of decision makers, the road administrators, don't care about animal conservation. So why to spend money on mitigation measures? I used part of my PhD research to raise data about human safety, economics, and legal perspectives involving wildlife vehicle collisions in Brazil. In São Paulo state again, around 4% of all vehicle crashes involved an animal. The number of animal vehicle collisions are increasing. Per year in São Paulo state, we have 700 human victims with minor and severe injuries and 20 human fatalities. Per year, the state spends $25 million covering expenses from animal vehicle collisions. And these include hospital care, vehicle removals, and property damage to road or roadside objectives. I also studied the legal perspective on animal vehicle collisions in Brazil. If you roadkill an animal in Brazil and have material damage or if you get injured, you can ask for financial compensation. There are 2 federal laws that consider road administrators liable for the accident. And per year, more than $1 million are spent to compensate these victims. By including human safety and economic legal perspective, I can get essential stakeholders interested in implementing measures related to highway and wildlife. Despite to work with what is sad and ugly, I'm very optimistic that we can save our animals from this unnatural mortality and give them safe passage to move through the landscape, increasing the connectivity. I am currently monitoring 30 underpasses, and in a 15-month period, about 6,000 of wild mammals used the crossing structures to get to the other side of the road. When I see videos like this, I'm full of hope that there is a solution. And there is a solution. Each animal that crosses the road safely because it has access to an underpass, an overpass, or a canop crossing bridges that are essential for arboreal species on tropical countries, it's something to be commemorated. This is good for animal, wildlife conservation, but it's also good for human safety. It's a wonderful experience to come to Netherlands and see all the effort to reconnect the landscape to wildlife. I'm really amazed about your numerous overpasses and underpasses. And I know how to help and guide my country to have more sustainable roads for people and wildlife. Brazil can do much more, and Brazil can do much better. I want to dedicate my career, my life, to make thousands of these structures happen across Brazil, and who knows, South America, Central America. And I want to share with you one last thing. When I received the mail from Future for Nature saying I was one of the 3 finalists, I was one of the 3 winners, that was the best day of my life. I was so happy that I screamed so loud because now, my work and my voice have the chance to represent all these amazing animals that we have in Brazil who can speak for themselves. And now I don't feel alone to fight anymore. So thank you very much, Future for Nature. Thank you very much, all of you, for supporting my work, for supporting my team, and for supporting life.
Following each of you gets harder and harder. Well, now on to our wonderful last winner for today. Olivier Nsengimana grew up in southern Rwanda as the firstborn child of 6 siblings to parents that were both primary school teachers. It was a happy, but physically extremely tough childhood in a rural mountainous landscape, growing up in farmland amongst cassava, sweet potato, beans and maize fields. But every day, long before he had to go off to school at 8 o'clock in the morning, he and the older children had to walk down into the steep river valleys to go and fetch water for their families, a round trip of 6 kilometers, half of which they had to carry a 20-liter jerry can back home on their heads. And this duty was expected of Olivier 3 to 4 times a day. He got very fit. He also told me it's probably why he's not so tall today. But these expeditions into the bush really became his favorite pastime, because it was out in nature that he felt happiest. Enchanted by all the animals that he saw, he'd easily get distracted and lose all track of time, to the frustration occasionally of his parents. But his favorite moments of all were watching the grey-crowned cranes dance with each other. These birds that, in his mind, were the absolute epitome of beauty and grace. And long before first light each morning, he was already aware of their presence, waking to their early morning calls and timing the course of his day as they called throughout. In 1994, when he was 9 years old, the genocide ripped through Rwanda and shattered his world. Afterwards, like so many of his countrymen, he set his heart on building the country that he loved so much. And this path led him to veterinary medicine and eventually back to the cranes that had meant so much to him as a child. Olivier has the most amazing passion and enthusiasm, which is matched by an equal integrity and dedication. He is a hugely special winner of this award today, and we are so excited to see what you do with it, Olivier. Welcome to the stage.
Yes, I come from the land of 1,000 hills, my country, Rwanda. It's beautiful, isn't it? Today, I want to tell you about a boy who grew up in those hills. When I was little, no one told me about the importance of nature. It's only when I grew up that I realized that nature is what we used to call the bush. But we loved it. I grew up in a very rural village. My friends and I had what I could describe as a free-range life. We climbed trees. We hid in a bush. And we jumped. Life was fun. But now I'm a parent with 2 kids. And I always try to take them out into the nature so that they can have the same fun that I always had. But being a parent, I also relate a lot to my life. My daughter, who's 5, sometimes when she's not happy, she will cry. And she will come for a hug. Other times, she runs into her room. And we have to go to her room and help her calm down. And this made me think, how did I cope? How did I manage when I was upset, when I was little? You know what I did? I would run crying, but not run into my room. I would run into the bush to be with nature. Let me tell you, nature is powerful. There's something magical about the nature. I would run crying, but I would not notice when I have stopped crying. The quiet, the songs of the birds, everything in the nature distracted me. I would spend the time and then go back home with a smile on my face, and most of the time forgetting why I was upset in the beginning. And that's nature for you. But today, I want to tell you something I found in nature, a beautiful bird. When I was out, whether walking or having fun in a bush, I saw the gray-crowned crane, the beautiful, colorful bird with a majestic crown. I remember when I was collecting water for my family, seeing them dancing and calling. It was a highlight of my lifetime. When I was young, I never knew that these birds could be in danger. I never knew that one day they could be at the brink of extinction in my country. I loved animals, but I never knew that one day I'll be working to save animals. But I want to tell you my journey to saving wildlife. 25 years ago, like this time, there was no hope of life for many Rwandans in my country because of genocide. The country was completely broken. I was 9 years old. But with all of that, after genocide, all of us Rwandans wanted just to raise up and rebuild our country. As a young boy, I didn't know what to do, but I told myself, the only thing I can do is to do well at school. Maybe I'll find a way to play, to contribute. Luckily, the government was encouraging young people to go to school so that they can play a role in rebuilding our country. So later on, I got a scholarship to study veterinary medicine. And the big expectation for the government was for us to come out and improve the livestock industry, provide enough food for our people. But during that training, I found something else. I became aware of species being endangered, and I met some conservationists. And at that moment, I got involved in conservation. My heart was gone. I knew that's what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. I knew conservation is how I wanted to contribute to rebuilding my country. My very first job was to be a gorilla doctor. One of the best jobs in the world. I always told my friend, can you imagine what it feels like to go out, see those animals that people pay to come and see? Russell was saying 1,500. And it's a lot of money. But I got to see them for free, help them. But I also got a salary. Can you imagine? So I was living a dream. Life was perfect. But being there, it was not the end. I started exploring what was happening with my birds, the great crown cranes. And what I found was shocking. we've lost about 50 to 80% of the population of cranes in the last 5 decades. And in Rwanda, if nothing was to be done, these birds would go extinct in a couple of years. So the great crown cranes, they are really beautiful. It's a symbol of wealth and longevity in my country. Everyone loves them. But unfortunately, there is bad news. We are losing most of their habitat. So many wetlands, they are being transformed into agricultural land. Wetlands are used by cranes for food and for breeding. Many people are loving them too much, and they want to have them in their gardens. So there is a huge illegal trade. It's no longer there. We are working on it. But what I want to say is, many people wanted to have them in their gardens. So this created a demand where the local communities are poaching and selling to those people. We've lost a huge number of cranes through the capture, the transport, and whenever they end in captivity, they can't breed, and people cut feathers to stop them from flying. So they die of stress and injuries. So this has been a big take from their habitat. So when I became aware of this threat, these are the photos that show you what the situation, what's happening. People capturing and putting them on ropes. When I became aware of this threat, I told myself, I'm happy here, the gorilla doctors. Who's helping the cranes? But I convinced myself I have to move and start something. And that's when I founded my organization, Rwanda Wildlife Conservation Association, to help such species and extend our efforts to other species in the country as well. So what we have been doing, we realize that many people love them, but they are not aware of what's driving near the extinction of those cranes. So we did a lot of media campaign. We told people, did you know that the cranes that we love, we could lose them at some point? Did you know that the practice, what we are doing, is what is endangering them? And then we called people, please, if you really love them and you want to see them in the future, you want your grandkids to see them, we can change the practice. Please call us, let us know, and give them back to us. I was so scared when I started because the most people I respected, big people, I thought they would deny my request. But luckily, they are the first who came to me, say like, oh, we didn't know, we love them and we don't want them to disappear, please have them. And this created a great movement where many Rwandans really joined, and we have registered all the captive cranes, and we've been taking them out of that situation. When we take them, we put them under quarantine, we check for their health, and whenever they are healthy enough, we are confident they can survive in the wild, we transfer them back to the wild, and we release them. And you'll be happy to know that since the beginning of this program, we have released over 150 cranes, which is 30% of the current population of cranes. So this is a huge contribution, 30%. But it's not only those cranes that we are taking back to the wild. The cranes that we are introducing, they are coupling, they are nesting, and they're having chicks. And this gives me the hope for the great crown crane population in my country. Unfortunately, during this program, we came across a huge number of disabled cranes. Many people, through cutting feathers, they accidentally break their wings or do it on purpose to stop them from flying completely. We have over 50 of these cranes. The government recently gave us 20 hectares of land to develop a sanctuary in the capital city. And this is our new project that I'm calling everyone to join us and help us to accomplish. I don't want to talk a lot. We do a lot of community work, and I want to give you a short video for you to watch.
The future belongs to young ones. So we have educational programs in schools or around the wetlands.
What we are doing here is to restore what we have lost. Today we have planted over 300 seedlings, and we are going to monitor and make sure this area restores and grows again into a healthy section of the buffer zone. All together we can protect what we have and make sure it's there for generation and generation.
Cranes wouldn't end in captivity if people didn't poach. So if you want to succeed, you have to involve those communities.
This cooperative here is made up of people who used to make a living from hunting cranes and other animals and selling them. So we have taken time to educate them and change them to being protectors.
Kimisanzu tujya tubona n'amahugurwa anyuranye agendanye n'iki gishanga cya Rugezi kandi duteze imbere n'igihugu cyacu cyane cyane tureba imbere hazaza kugira ngo
We want all of those local communities to take actions, to be involved. We want them to be proud of what they have. It's nice to be here!
In my country, especially, there is a domestic consumption. When they are there, they die of stress, malnutrition, and in addition, those cranes in captivity, they don't breed. Some of the cranes can have a second chance, and they can be used to increase the wild population of cranes in the country. We care for them, we examine them, and when the quarantine is finished, we select those cranes that can qualify to go back to the wild. Today we'll be hitting 100 cranes in the wild. When you see them running and some of them flying, it's a huge relief. It's worth the effort, it's worth the hard work. Cranes, they like to flock up, to find food together, fly together. And every time I see them, it reminds me how, like, as humans, we need to work in a team. We can't succeed with everything we are doing without working together.
It's things like this that gives me the hope for the future. Today is a great day for me and my team. Thank you to Future for Nature for honoring us with this prestigious award. It means a lot. It means we can continue the work we are doing. Let me tell you a short story. When I was a little boy, my friends used to call me baggy shorts because my mom bought me like shorts that were baggy, too big for me. I didn't like this surname, really, at all. And I always wanted to get rid of it. When we start this work with cranes, people start to call us Team Cranes. I say, wow, yeah, I have a new name. And I always enjoy going out and kids calling me saying, hi, Dr. Olivier, we want to be like you. But today I want to say, I got a new name. I want to be called Future for Nature. And I want to transform many young Rwandans, my members of the community, into ambassadors for the Future for Nature. Before I finish, I want to tell you something. Look at us. Divya, saving the sharks. Fernanda, saving animals from the roadkill. Olivier, saving the cranes, and many other people. But we are alone. We need more people in this flock. We want it to grow. Most of the time I hear people saying, like, I wonder the future of those cranes, that forest. Well, today I want to tell you, the future of these animals, it depends on me, and you, and you, and you. It depends on all of us. I want to call you to start today. Think of what you can do to help our nature, to help our animals. And the little you can do, the little you can do, the little we can all do, it makes a big impact. Together, we can make a big difference. Thanks for this award. I would like to dedicate it to my team, our supporters, and my family who supports me a lot, my kids. Thank you.
A very powerful image indeed, as they fly off into the world. And we will join them, will we not, ladies and gentlemen? Will we not all become part of that flock that will support these young people and be the wind under their wings? Well, now is the moment we've all been waiting for, and I'm not going to forget it this year. We are giving the prizes. So can I please ask our guest of honor to come to the stage? And I would like to welcome the first of our incredible winners, Divya Karnad, ladies and gentlemen. Hold your check. And now the second of our winners. Please come to the stage, Fernanda Abra. Hold your check. Bravo. And last but far from least, Olivier Nsengimana. I'm so proud of you. Come, we'll do one more photo quickly with all the winners together. Olivier, hold your picture. Everybody, say whiskey. Thank you all. Oh, well. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure you will agree with me, it has been another incredible event. And as much as these young people are leading the charge and inspiring us with their passion and dedication, they need our help to carry on. Many of you here are already involved in conservation and have been doing the most incredible things. But I think, again, this is an incredible opportunity for us all to take a pledge today that if we haven't started already, this is the day when it begins. Starting to take small steps consistently every day to serve the environmental cause. To take them together. Because as Olivier said, together we are an incredibly powerful force for change. So we're going to all meet now next door for a celebratory drink. Please take time to talk to each of our winners, to talk to all the amazing conservationists in the room. Let's come up with a plan and let's change the world today and create that sustainable future that we long for and so desperately need. So I'd ask you all please to exit through those doors on that side. The people who have to stay behind for photographs, please do so. We'll join you in a minute. Thank you all, ladies and gentlemen. Have a good day.